Thank
Hang in there. Hold tight. As I get our video on, I'm going to mute everybody, and we'll talk right after the video.
Hi everyone, and happy Tu B'Shvat. To start things off, I'm going to ask you a bit of a strange question. Imagine a world where we celebrated everyone's birthday on the same day. Every year, let's say, on October 18th, because that's my birthday. It was National Birthday Day, and everyone threw parties, and it was super fun, and there were no birthday celebrations for the whole rest of the year. Woohoo! It sounds like something out of a creepy dystopian novel, right? Like 1984 or Brave New World. No one is an individual, independence is suppressed, everyone is just a cog in the greater machine of society. We wouldn't want to do that, right? Well then, why do we do that for fruit? Let me explain. See, most of us are used to thinking of Tu B'Shvat as a day to celebrate trees or nature overall. We eat Israeli figs and dates, we make fancy salads, or meditate on the mystical symbolism of trees and fruit at a Tu B'Shvat Seder. But originally, this holiday was just the designated day for the birth of fruits, and was used to calculate taxes. There's a biblical law called Meiser, or tithes, which is like a religious tax on produce. If I own a fruit tree, every year I total up how much fruit grew, and then I set aside a percentage of it to give away. Now, determining how much I owe each year should be simple. If my fruit grew before Rosh Hashanah back in 5777, I include it in last year's total. And if it grew after Rosh Hashanah in 5778, I include it in this year's total. And yet, that's not how we do it. Instead of using the date a fruit actually grew, we pretend that all of the fruit shares a birthday, the most recent Tu B'Shvat. We count everything before Tu B'Shvat as being part of last year's total, and everything after Tu B'Shvat as being part of next year's total. It seems really odd. Why are all the trees sharing a birthday? And what's so special about this particular date, Tu B'Shvat, that it's somehow more important than Rosh Hashanah? Why can't we just decide when a fruit grew based on, I don't know, when it actually grew? Is there any special meaning or significance to Tu B'Shvat? Or is it just an arbitrary date that relates to tax law? So the truth is, the date really is logical and significant. Bear with me. Here's the logic the Talmud offers us. In Israel, the rainy season mostly ends right before Tu B'Shvat. That means that by Tu B'Shvat, the soil is wet, and the trees have everything they need to eat and grow strong in the coming year. So basically, Tu B'Shvat marks the day that the nourishment the trees need in order to bear fruit is in place. So, it's like instead of celebrating the day your mother gave birth to you, let's celebrate the day the local pharmacy got restocked with prenatal vitamins. Happy Folic Acid Day, everyone! But remember, Tu B'Shvat is essentially a tax law, so maybe the key to understanding this strange birthday lies in a deeper understanding of religious taxes. Yay, taxes! See, when I pay tax to the US government, it's almost like a business arrangement. I expect paved roads, safe neighborhoods, protected freedoms, a justice system. You get the point. When I pay tax to God, though, it's not because I expect something back. I give Meiser because God is the creator of my fruit, my trees, my land, everything. And so it all actually belongs to him. So when he tells me to give Meiser, he can do that because the produce is really just his anyway. The truth is, though, that if I had an orchard where I grew fruit trees, I might not find it so easy to remember that it's really God's orchard, and I'm just his steward. I mean, I probably paid for the land with money that I worked hard for. I put a lot of effort into planting the trees and tending to them, and spent hours climbing up and down ladders in the heat of the sun to gather my fruit. I know everyone in all the orange juice commercials looks blissfully happy picking fruit as if it's as relaxing as getting a massage, but I'm pretty sure that there's hard labor involved. If I'm putting in all that effort, subconsciously, I probably believe that I'm the master of my orchard. I'm the guy that gets it done. And when tax season rolls around, maybe I start thinking, I don't want to give my hard-earned produce away. I earned it. I worked for it. And I don't really want to be told what to do with it. But something busts this illusion. Rain. Rain is the one part of the growth of my trees I have absolutely no control over. Despite all the other things I can do for my trees, the nourishment that rain provides is just completely out of my hands. Rain is the ultimate reminder that no matter what I think I can do, in the end, I always come back to relying on God. So when a new fruit comes in the day after Rosh Hashanah, we don't look at it as a newborn, a happy gift of the new year. We look at who's ultimately responsible for this fruit. This fruit is here not only because of my hard work. It's here primarily because of God and the rain He blessed us with. And when did that rain fall? Last year, in the rainy season, before Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the day when God's role in the growth of the trees is most clear. The day the trees have gotten all their nutritious, God-given rain. The day comes around and it hits you. You can't pretend you made it all happen by yourself. And so, of course, you humbly and gratefully go and take care of your miser. This Tu B'Shvat, as you try to bite into some dried buxer, or perhaps more deliciously, some dates or figs, take a minute to think about where it all comes from. Remind yourself that fruits don't actually grow inside plastic packaging in supermarkets, and wine doesn't just materialize on the shelves of liquor stores. They're all gifts of the land, lovingly nourished by God. And even the figurative fruits of our labor, our personal successes and accomplishments, and our collective achievements as a community, they all come back to God. Tap into that today. Embrace it. Maybe think about how you're going to pay it forward. Who might benefit from a little miser? As you lean back and savor your fruit today, let the gratitude wash over you. Happy birthday. To the trees. You guys knew what I meant.
Hi, if you found this video meaningful, pay it forward. Share it with family and friends by clicking below, down there. And for hundreds of other amazing videos, check out aleph-beta.org. Bye!
All right, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video about Tu B'Shvat. That was quite informative and entertaining to learn about Tu B'Shvat, and it was certainly a fascinating perspective. And that's what we want to do here today. I want to spend some time talking with you about the significance of Tu B'Shvat from a perspective, from the Rebbe's teachings, on how we can make a difference in the world. And of course, it's a question we sometimes ask ourselves: what impact do I make? What kind of legacy do I want to leave here in the world? And thank you, Rav. Today is Tu B'Shvat, and Rabbi Masinta just brought me some fresh fruit into the office. So we will make a bracha she'achiyanu just now, as we're meant to eat some fruits from the land of Israel, and discuss what this is all about. Of course, as with every Jewish festival, it is about the lessons for life that we need to learn from it. And so let's think now about what Tu B'Shvat is and what its lessons to each of us are, what lessons we could glean from it that apply to our lives, that we could make ourselves better human beings, that we could understand what does it mean when the Torah says that man is like a tree in the field. Ki Adam eitz hasada, man is like a tree in the field. What is the meaning of that verse? So, firstly, as we discussed just Tu B'Shvat itself, which is today, and we're celebrating this day. What is Tu? Tu literally is the letters Tes Vav, which is 15. And today is the 15th day in the month of Shvat. So, as you saw in the video, what we do today is we eat some fruits, some fresh fruits, specifically of the 7 fruits of the land of Israel. So, fig is one of them. Let's quickly remind ourselves what those 7 fruits are. The Torah says it's actually not fruits per se, rather, the 7 kinds of produce from the land of Israel: wheat, barley, grapes, dates, pomegranates, olives, and figs. Those are the 7. Now, if you have not had, and I probably have not had a fig since last year Rosh Hashanah, it's not exactly my favorite fruit, then I will make a bracha she'achiyanu, because I haven't had this in the season. And there's a custom to eat specifically a fruit that would give us the bracha of she'achiyanu. Some people have a custom to eat carobs. I'll get to carobs in a moment. Why one would eat carobs on Tu B'Shvat. It's actually a story for that, but we'll leave that story for the end. Okay, I have to incentivize you somehow to stick through to the end. So Tu B'Shvat, as we are here today, and we talk about, obviously, trees play an important part in our lives. You think about all trees, the trees, they produce oxygen, they reduce carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Trees are also an important component of the natural landscape of the world because they prevent the erosion and the provision of a weather-sheltered ecosystem. You think of the whole world, about how the whole ecosystem world works. It's fascinating. Some people blame it on Mother Nature. We know it's Almighty God and Hashem's amazing creation of the world. We all benefit from trees in one way or another, whether it's from the wood that the tree provides us. We build our home. I have a nice desk here made out of wood. This building has wood. You have firewood when wintertime comes around. We have our furniture. Think of even the book here with my text that I'm reading to you. Where does this come from? It wouldn't be possible without trees, right? So, of course, the tree is an important aspect for our general existence. Now, my friends, it's true that trees are important to us for so many good reasons. But why the need to create a whole Jewish holiday for this day? I understand, but what's the connection to our spiritual lives? It's great that there are lots of important lessons we can learn from trees. But we know, as Jewish mysticism teaches us, that everything plays an important part in our life. And certainly trees, especially if we have a whole holiday, a whole festival celebrating trees, Tu B'Shvat, then there's a connection not only to our physical, mundane lives and to our spiritual lives. And we have to understand what is that connection so that we can best learn from the trees and apply its lessons to our lives. As the verse says by the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah the prophet says, Kikimei ha'etz yemei ami. As the days of a tree are the days of my people. So certainly there's a deep connection between trees and human beings, and it's an explicit verse, as we said, man is like a tree in the field. So my question to you is, what is our affinity to the botanical universe? Do trees have feelings? Can they talk? Can they walk? Can they think? Why in the world is the human being, as the Torah compares us, to a tree? What do you think? What's the comparison between a human and a tree? We'll stay here till you figure it out. All right, let's analyze a little bit. Let's explore a little bit of these connections, the makeup of a tree. Let's look at a tree. If you look at a tree, the tree's primary component is its roots. The root is what anchors the tree into the ground and supplies it with those water, with all the nutrients that the tree needs. Now, of course, the tree also has its body, the trunk. That's made up of branches and leaves. That's the body of the tree. And of course, finally, a healthy tree, or at least a fruit tree, is producing fruit. And those fruit, we know, could be harvested. We could plant its seeds, and it could be enjoyed by humans and by animals, and you're able to reproduce it so many more times after that. So the tree itself is reproductive. Now, of course, the Torah compares us, human beings, to trees, because a human being is also comprised of these three components, these three aspects. The roots, our history, the body, who we are, and the fruit, our next generation. And this comparison is important, not on multiple levels, as Chassidus tells us. Psychologically, chronologically, and spiritually. Let's think about what connection there is in these three spheres. Let's start on the psychological level. On a psychological level, the roots of the tree, think about it. They're buried underground. Do you see them now? They're mostly invisible. Okay? But that represents the subconscious layers of the human psyche, which are, for the most part, invisible. Oftentimes, you see somebody, you encounter a friend, you don't know what's going on. What happened in their home last night, this morning, what's going on? Sometimes we're in the shop and we have an irate cashier teller, and it gets us annoyed. Or we could think, maybe that person needs a smile. Maybe that person needs an uplifting word. Maybe that person just needs some human support. That's on a psychological level. Each of us, our subconscious, deep in our hearts, we all have that level, and that's not something that's necessarily visible to the public. It's deep inside. And just like the roots of a tree, the composition, the breadth, the depth of the human subconscious, it's invisible, it's disguised. But that contributes to the roots of our persona. That's on a psychological level. Of course, our roots represents our history, where we come from, our parents, our ancestry, which is also a very important aspect and part of our human makeup of who we are. Let's go to the next level. The body of the tree. That's the conspicuous manifestation of the roots. There's the roots, which is the subconscious. But the body, that symbolizes the conscious personality of the human being. The way we describe our existence consciously to ourselves. It's the person you think you know. That's the next element, the next aspect of the human being. And of course, as we said, there is also the chronological level. The fruit of the tree, which is something that's enjoyed, it's harvested and it's consumed by others. That represents the impact that we have on the lives of the people around us. That is symbolic of our ability to plant a seed in a fellow human being, to see it sprout, to grow, to bear fruit, whether it's our children or our students, whether it's the person that we encounter in the street and we make a difference in their lives. That's the next level, the impact we make on others, on those around us. Now, on another way of looking at it, the chronological root, right? On a chronological level, the roots that represent our childhood years. It's another way of looking at it. When our subconscious convictions, our feelings are being molded, it's our childhood, which is why investing time and energy in our children, of course, is critical. It's so important. Yet I was reading a letter of the Rebbe that I want to read to you, my friends. And in this letter, let me share with you, it's from the very first volume of the Rebbe's letters, Igros Kodesh, very beginning. That means in the early days of his leadership. Let me read the letter to you. He says, when a scratch is made on a mature tree, the scratch will remain only at the location in which it was made and will not cause any other harm to the remainder of the tree. However, when a scratch is made on the seed that will be planted, it is possible that due to one scrape, the entire tree will be damaged. Says the Rebbe in this letter, the same applies to the education of our children. If a middle-aged person who's already lived half their life in this world compromises on their Yiddishkeit, it will only affect the present because he's lived so many years without compromise. The years he's lived without compromise will give him strength to quickly forget the compromise and return to complete Judaism. Use an analogy. I was in Cape Town a few weeks ago, and I met an old man. He's in his 80s. I don't know if he was on the shiur today. And this man, every day, numerous times a day, he gets down and does 25 push-ups. In fact, outside the shul, this man was doing 80 push-ups. The strength he has to do that. And he got the rabbi, he got me. I couldn't do anything, unfortunately. But what this man told me something interesting. He said it's much harder to catch on, my age. He says a child, a youngster, you go through school and you exercise. At some point, maybe they stop. But he says it becomes ingrained in you. It becomes part of you. It's sort of like, I don't know, I learned how to ride a bicycle as a kid. I haven't ridden a bicycle now in years. But if I jump back on the bicycle, I'm sure that I could ride the bicycle again. Why? Because it's part of me. It's something I do. So in this letter, the Rebbe is saying that when we deal with the education of young children, we have to realize how vulnerable, how impressionable they are. A scratch in the trunk of an older tree doesn't amount to much. But a defect in the roots, that could impact the entire tree in dramatic ways. So in this letter, he's telling us about the significance, the importance of childhood is like the invisible roots of a tree. But it is the foundation of everything that comes later. Nurture those roots and you'll have a beautiful tree. That's the message that he was conveying in this letter that I think is very, very important. And I want to share with you another letter the Rebbe wrote to a teacher, or to students of a teacher. And this teacher, she just passed away last week. Her name is Mrs. Zamir. She's a very famous teacher in Israel. In which city? I'm forgetting. I think in Rehovot or Chulon. She was a Holocaust survivor. Not Holocaust. She survived the difficulties of life in Russia. Born in the early 1930s. She passed away literally a few weeks ago. And this Mrs. Zamir, she and her brothers were hidden in an orphanage in Siberia. And their aunt came to save them. It's a fascinating story. I won't go through the whole details now. But I want to just read this letter that the Rebbe writes to her students. And he says, greetings and blessings. This is the 1950s. I happily received your drawings with the letter of your teacher, Mrs. Amir. The drawings and letter reached me just before the yahrzeit of my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, last week. I'm writing in response to Tu B'Shvat. That's when he's writing this letter back to them. To connect, he says, in your drawings, I saw children, boys and girls, trees and flowers. To connect all these together, I will mention that my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, cherished and loved very much the children of Israel, all, young and old, but especially the little children. He concerned himself enormously with their education and their welfare, wherever they were. In each child, he saw a plant that would grow in the future to be a beautiful fruit tree, producing delicious, sweet fruit. But this, my friends, the Rebbe writes here, depends on you, on the desire and effort of each boy and girl. A tree is a good example of this. When one plants a seed or a young plant in the ground, he must protect it from weeds and other harmful things. He must be sure to take care of it until it will grow to become a tree that bears good fruits. The same applies to every child, boy and girl. God said to his prophet, Neitzah matai maseh yadai. They are the branch of my planting, the work of my hands. Lihispaer, in which I take pride. It's a verse in Isaiah. The Creator may be blessed, planted within each of you a holy soul and a neshama, which was an actual part of God. It is your responsibility to protect the godly seed from bad and harmful grass, meaning from bad influences. And you must give it water. You have to nurture it. What do you think the Rebbe compares to water? Torah. A Torah life and its mitzvahs that give us life. then God will give and give again His blessings, that you should succeed to grow into trees that bear good and praised fruit. Your parents and teachers will be happy, and the entire nation will be so proud and beautified from you. With blessings for success and good news, the Rebbe's signature. And I'm reminded as I read this letter of the Rebbe, beautiful and fascinating, how he says how each of the children will grow and will be beautiful fruit-bearing trees. But something stuck out to me. You know, this past Shabbos we read the portion of Beshalach. And in the portion we were reading about how the Jews were constantly kvetching and complaining. They had the Erev Rav with them, the Riffraff, who caused these complaints. And one of the complaints that comes about is when they complain about the waters. They say the water, it's bitter. But it's interesting, and they call that particular geographic location Mara, bitter, in commemoration of their bitter complaints. But there's an interesting way of understanding the verse. The verse says here that they layachlu lishta, they couldn't drink the waters. Why? Ki marim, because they were bitter. Now literally we understand this verse to mean that the waters were bitter. Says the Mizritcha Magid, a different interpretation, because the verse doesn't say literally, it says marim haim, they were bitter. So you could translate that what was bitter? The water was bitter. The Mizritcha Magid translated it a little bit differently. He says marim haim, the people were bitter. The people were bitter. You hear that? Very interesting interpretation from the Maggid of Mezrich. He says, if you are bitter, everything around you will be bitter. Think about that. If I'm a bitter person, if that's my Veltan Shalom, everything around me, we always find the flaws, the problems. The Rebbe famously said, when you see a problem, it's God telling you to find and be the solution. That's the message. Not that we should be finding flaws and problems in everything around us. You be the solution. They tell a story about a fellow who was traveling from one town to another. He was moving. And he asks, the farmer relates, how people ask him, what's it like in the next town that I'm moving to? So the farmer asks him, what are the people like in your town where you're coming from? One person says the people are fantastic, they're fabulous, they're amazing, they're friendly, they're warm, they're kind, they're generous, they're giving. They're the most wonderful, hospitable people in the world. He says, guess what? In the town you're going to, that's exactly the kind of people you're going to find. And another type of person, he asks, what are the people like in the town I'm going to? Tell me what they're like in your town. My town, miserable, terrible, horrible, the worst. That's the type of people you're going to find where you're going to. You are going to find exactly the way you feel. Kimarim haim. It's up to you. But the Rebbe is telling us more so here. He's telling us here the difference that we make. It's true that in childhood, how impressionable we are. Of course, as we graduate childhood, as we become more self-sufficient humans, then we become more, we grow taller, more independent. But at least we've emerged to become independent, self-standing adults from the impressions we got. And therefore, a child, just like the little seedling, is so impressionable. Of course, as parents and grandparents, we have that responsibility, or I should say the privilege, that we could raise our children in this way where we know what difference we are going to make. And if we do that, then as we grow older, as the child becomes older, as each of us become leaders in our communities, don't tell me I'm not a leader. As we marry, we have children, we go to work, we have colleagues, then we could create something larger than ourselves. We can make a bigger difference. We begin to produce fruit that continues to procreate, to impact generations to come, whether it's our own children or whether it's the people in the community we make a difference to. We make a difference. And we have to remember, as the Torah tells us, that God created us b'tselem Elokim. Every single human being is indispensable to the divine plan for this world. We are all created in the divine image. And to quote the verse at the very beginning of Bereshis, what does it say here? It says, "Vayivar Elokim es Adam b'tzalmo." God created man in His image, in the divine image, male and female. And what does it say in the very verse there? What is the first mitzvah recorded in the Torah? Not necessarily the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people that we had last week, Kiddush HaChodesh. But the very first mitzvah recorded in the Torah is Pru'urvu, to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth. Of course, literally that's referring to having children, bringing our children into the world. But it's also referring to the difference, the impact that we make around us, the influence we have on the people around us. And so, on a spiritual level, the roots represents our faith. That's what supplies the nutrients. It's our source of nurture and perseverance. Without the roots, the tree can't survive, right? Faith is just like the roots. That's what constitutes the foundation of our life. Our belief in the essential spirituality and the meaning of life is the foundation of our entire tree. It's our unbreakable conviction in God. That's emunah, faith. And that's connected to the very essence of our core, of our being. That's the unbreakable connection that each of us has. That's the essence. And so in the letter, he says, trees are made up of three general sections: the roots, the trunk, and the fruit, as we've been discussing. And so let's analyze each one of them. The roots, which we said are concealed from the eye, but they hold the main vitality of the tree. The roots are what keep the tree standing strong. With strong roots, you don't have to worry that the strong winds will uproot it. And as he says here, the root is our faith. As we said, Ki ha'adam eitz hasad, the man is a tree of the field. We have to look at the lessons that we could derive. How we're similar to the tree. And so if the root is our faith, then we can connect to our Creator. The energy of the Torah we study, the mitzvahs we do, that's the first level. Let's look at the next level of the tree's lessons. And this is the spiritual root we just discussed. Right? That's our very essence, our connection to Hashem. Let's go now to the trunk, which is the larger, the bulk of the tree. Okay? And as he says in the letter, as time goes on, it's going to grow, it's going to get wider, more branches and leaves. Well, from our faith stems the trunk of our understanding, of our feelings, our motivations. And so says the Rebbe in this letter, the trunk, this is the study of Torah, the fulfillment of mitzvahs and good deeds. And these must take up the larger bulk of our life, of our behavior, of our deeds. The trunk, which is the visible body of our spiritual lives, our intellectual, our emotional, our practical achievements, who we are, what we do. And so when we study Torah, when we observe and do the mitzvahs, when we behave ethically, when we're kind and caring to those around us, that's the trunk. That's the visible expression of ourselves, and that's the expression through Torah and mitzvahs. And then comes the spiritual fruits. And he says that the ultimate completion of a tree is when it bears fruit. For in the fruit, there is a seed which will be planted to grow new trees, generation after generation. And so, the fruit is what represents our power of spiritual procreation. That's the pinnacle achievement, is when we're able to make a difference in the world. This is the idea of planting a seed that's growing to grow and more people with roots of faith and trunks of Torah and good deeds, imagine how many more fruit it could bring to the world. Those people will end up bearing more fruit, bringing great merit to the world. That's what the Rebbe writes in this letter, is the fruit and the seeds, the spiritual procreation, that we inspire others around us as well. That's our goal. And he says, the purpose of a fruit tree is to bear fruit. Those fruits later reproduce more trees that will bear more fruit. And likewise, each one of us must have an influence on our surroundings, whether it's at shul or school. He's writing this letter to children, but he says that's the influence that we have of people around us. And I say to each of you, whether you're going to shul or school or the supermarket or wherever, this is our purpose, our function in this world. And so on a deeper level, the reason of the Torah's specific emphasis on a fruit tree. And I want to read a verse to you where the Torah tells us in the book of Devarim, and it's talking about when you're going out to war. And it says, when you besiege a city for many days, you're waging a war against it to capture it. Don't destroy the trees by wielding an axe against them. Torah says you can eat from them, but you should not cut them down. Why does the Torah emphasize? What's the emphasis on a fruit tree? Because it represents the most important aspect of being a human being. What does it mean? Giving to others. Our purpose would not be fulfilled if we just lived like hermits, if we were ascetics living out in the Ich weiß nicht wo, stay in the forest and the mountains in Tibet. No, Judaism tells us we have to know what our purpose and mission, what are we here for? Only by having an impact on others, by making a contribution in the world, somewhere or another. Only then can we define our mission, our purpose, our raison d'etre of why we are here. What are we here for? For what purpose? What's my mission? Why did God put me here? The entire raison d'etre, the entire purpose of a fruit tree that the Torah describes in this verse is to give off fruit. And that's why the law tells us, the Gemara tells us, the verse says that you're not allowed to cut it down. But what's very interesting, that's the Torah. Let me read something to you from the Gemara. The Gemara says, the Torah tells us you shouldn't cut down a fruit tree outside of the city, nor to prevent an irrigation ditch from bringing water to them so that they don't dry up. This is all the laws that the Torah says, even in your enemy's territory. Don't destroy its trees. Anyone who cuts such a tree, the Torah prescribes lashes. There's a punishment. Yet the Gemara tells us this does not apply only in a siege, but actually in all situations. Anyone who cuts down a fruit tree with destructive intent, remember the word destructive, only then are they punished. Says the Gemara, nevertheless, you are allowed to cut down a fruit tree that's causing damage to other trees or to fields belonging to others, or if a high price could be received for its wood. The Torah only prohibited cutting down a tree with destructive intent. It's permissible to cut down any non-fruit-bearing tree, even if one has no need for it. Similarly, one may cut down a fruit-bearing tree that has become old and produces only a slight yield, which doesn't warrant the effort required to care for it. What's the Gemara telling us here? That certain fruit trees are allowed to be cut because they are not producing fruit. It's not serving its purpose. And in that sense, our purpose, our function is to produce fruit. Each person on their own level, according to their own talents and circumstances. For one person, you're very wealthy, give charity. Make a difference. Use that money for a purpose in this world. Maybe for someone else, it's giving guidance, inspiration, making an impact. Maybe you have some talent, some skill that you could share. Maybe you could give a helping hand to someone in need. Every single person we know can be a fruit-bearing tree. Share what you learn in this shiur. Share this shiur with somebody else. Right? We come, we learn Torah. What are we doing with it? Take that inspiration, take that knowledge, if you're inspired by it, and share it with someone else. As the Alter Rebbe says in the introduction of Tanya, when you do so, Meir Einei Shneim, it will crystallize it for you, and it will help the other person too. Don't take that information, just hog it for yourself. Share the bounty with others. Maybe you're having a conversation with a coworker, with an employee, with a friend, with your brother, with your sister, with your son, your daughter, your grandchild, with somebody, with a neighbor, with a friend. Every time we share a Torah thought with someone else, every time we inspire somebody to grow in their closeness to Hashem, we are producing priceless fruits that will last for an eternity. That is our mission, our purpose. That's what we're here for. The Gemara tells us, this fruit bearing is not only for trees itself. This is even people you inspire and influence. When you teach somebody Torah, the Gemara considers it as if you've actually brought that person, as if you brought that person into this world. So hopefully this gives us an understanding of what the Gemara tells us, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, that man is like a tree in the field. Because if you think about it, as we discussed the purpose, what is a fruit tree? What are we here for? Remember, we discussed 3 basic levels. There is who we are, our roots. There is who we think we are. That's the body, the trunk. And then there is who others think we are. That's the fruits. And in a tree, these 3 components are integrated into a single wholesome entity. Our job, the Torah is telling us, is to integrate the components of our tree so that our roots, so that our bodies, so that our fruits are all one. When we can influence, when we can inspire, when we can make a difference to those around us. My friends, think about that. In what way are you like a fruit tree? What difference can you make to those around you? I saw a message this morning, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice, but let me just pick it up on my phone. I saw a message from another rabbi who was sharing what would a tree say to itself. Let me just read it to you. It says here, because it's Tu B'Shvat, naturally this would be a good time for trees to engage in soul searching the same way we humans do on Rosh Hashanah. So he says as follows. If trees could communicate with words, this might be a tree's New Year's checklist. Maybe this is what it would sound like. Trees' New Year's resolutions. Did I grow towards the sun as a tree should, reaching up higher and higher towards that which I can never grasp, but which nurtures me all the same the more I strive towards it? Did I shelter the seedlings that live in my shade so they will grow up to be a next generation like myself? Did I make sure my roots remain firmly planted in the soil that nurtures them? And did I drop my leaves there in the fall to give back life to that which sustains me? Did I ensure that my fruits were sweet and nourished all that came to enjoy them? Did everyone walk away from me with a smile? Did I bend gently in the wind, accepting what God sends, but never breaking or giving up hope? Did I grow in strength and wisdom with each new ring this year? I come to think of this. Not a bad checklist for us human beings either, right? So, as we mark Tu B'Shvat, how? By eating fruits, by eating the delicious fruits, the 7 kinds that are singled out by the Torah, that the land of Israel is praised for its bounty of. We said before, the wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. We have to apply these lessons of the fruit in our own lives. And as we still have a couple of more minutes, I thought I would share with you another very important lesson that I think would be important to us. And it's interesting what the Gemara tells us. One of the great Talmudic sages, Rabbi Huna, explains, there's a verse, it says, Adam lahevel dama. Man is like a breath. Yamav kitzel over. His days are as a fleeting shadow. That's a verse in Tehillim. Now, one of this great sage, Rabbi Huna, he explains this verse to mean that there are 3 types of shadows. And he says like this. He says, if you look outside, you'll see 3 types of shadows, my friends. The first is the shadow of a bird. Okay? Birds, they fly by very quickly, and they cast its shadow kitzel over for just a fleeting moment. Then he says, there is a different type of a shadow. The shadow of a wall. A wall has some permanence, right? You could look when it's the sun is sometimes visible, and sometimes the wall will block the sun. But at midday, there is no wall shadow. The sun will shine directly down. And then finally, he says there is a third type of a shadow. And that is the shadow that is generated by a tree. And this type of shadow is consistent. It's always present. Unlike the bird, which is fleeting. Unlike the wall, which, depending on the time of day, the shadow of a tree is always present. And so Rabbi Huna continues. He says, "V'halavai ketziloi shel koisel." If only we would be like the shadow that is cast by a wall, a ketziloi shel ilan, or like the shadow of a tree. He says, but sadly, ela ketziloi shel oif b'shah shu af. For most people, life is like the shadow of a bird in flight. Yamav kitzel over. A person's years are like a fleeting shadow. That's the type of shadow, unfortunately, life is mostly like. But yet, we know the famous words from Hillel, V'im lo yachshav emasai, if not now, then when? How is it that our days are like the fleeting shadow of a bird? Doesn't seem to remain stationary even for a moment. Think about it. How much time do we have in this world? They asked in the restaurant the other day, what type of Coke do you want? Regular or diet? I said, no, I don't want a diet. We don't know how long we're here for. But yet, we have some degree of continuity, of permanence, of comfort in life. People live 70, 80, maybe 90, 100 years. If our days are as insubstantial as a shadow, are they not at least like the shadow of a tree? Why of a bird, is Rabbanah saying? Why is he telling us that our days are like the shadow of a bird which is fleeting, which is so quick? But the message here, I think, is very simple. Simple, but profound. The 3 types of shadows, they represent 3 very different lifestyles. There are people who generate the shadow of a bird. There are others who create the shadow of the wall, and yet others are compared to the tree and its shadow. Every human being, every single one of us, we leave our impact. Each of us casts our own inimitable shadow on the world around us. Life is a powerful play, and you contribute your verse. I don't know whose quote that was, but it comes from somebody. Each of us contributes our note to the ballad that we call life. The question is, how profound and how real is our impact? Will my shadow be that of a bird, of a wall, or of a tree? Which one will it be? That's the question. What impact, what difference are we making in the world? What will my legacy be? Which one will it be? It's never too late. Rabbi Yohanan says that there are those individuals whose lives can be compared to the passing of a bird. Flies by, quick, chick-chock. The bird flies and the shadow flies with it. This represents an individual whose impact is fleeting. They may live for many years. They may spend 5 decades building their business, their company. But this one day, just like that, could be gone. What's going to happen to it? Go down the tubes of what lasting value is it? Right? They could have been very, very busy. But essentially, they're like a flying bird. Just flew by and that's it. What purpose, what meaningful involvement did they have in this world? What impression did they make? Did they leave their internal, did they leave some kind of a dent? They cast a shadow by being alive. But it was so fleeting. Yeah, they walked the streets, they shopped in the stores, they made money. They bought houses, acquisitions, mergers, you name it. Nice clothes, gadgets, tchotchkes. Maybe drove a fancy car. Of what value is it? That's a shadow that comes and goes. Here today, gone tomorrow. You think about the past year or two of what COVID has done to us. And people say how many hours they worked. Did we seize the opportunity to connect with our family, with our loved ones? Some people are just so very, very busy, but they don't leave an impression. What difference did they make? How many hours a day were they at work? But for what purpose? What difference did it make? But there's another category of people. Maybe their lives can be compared to the shadow of a wall. A shadow of a wall has some permanence. Right? You can see it during the early hours of the morning. You can see it in the late afternoon. But in midday, the impact of that wall fades. There is no wall shadow. It's not making its difference. And then, of course, there are people who leave an impact, right? But maybe when it's not too hot. Maybe when the game is waning. There's not so much action going on. They become sensible. But in the morning, in the evening hours, when they're young, when they're old, when things are quiet and calm, they're ready to give themselves to others. They invest in life then. But Hillel says in Lei Achshav, don't say tomorrow. There's a German expression, Morgen, morgen, nar nicht heute, sagen alle Falulota. Tomorrow, not today. That's a foolish thing to say. As long as the sun is burning hot, where are they? What difference are they making? My kids ask me, when are you coming home, Dad? It's a good question. Or when the sun sets. When we finally make it, when we get older, when we have... No. This doesn't matter what age or stage you are in life. What difference are you making now? That's what Hillel's saying. If not now, then when? Another famous Mishnah. Don't say, when I have the time, I'll do it. Maybe you'll never have that free time. Do you know what tomorrow will bring? When does our family need us if not now? So let's be there for them now. Let's not be like the wall that's only there when it's, when it's convenient, but missing in action when they're needed. That's missing the point. And so, finally, there is the life which could be compared to the shadow of a tree. Under the branches of a tree, you could always find shade and comfort. Under the branches of a tree, the shade is always there. Whether it's morning, whether it's midday, whether it's evening, the tree always casts its healing shade. It always invites every passerby to bask in its tranquility, in its beautiful, pleasant shade. Very famous story from the Gemara of a fellow who is traveling and he passes through a shell, beautiful tree that gives him, he was traveling through the desert, the blazing heat of the sun. He is thirsty. He needs something to drink. He's tired. He's weary. He needs somewhere to rest. And there's this tree. And the tree has very pleasant shade beneath it. And the tree has delicious fruits for him to eat. And the tree has a stream of water running beneath it, in which he could quench his thirst, refresh, rejuvenate his body, clean himself. And as he's parting from the tree after a restful time and rejuvenation, re-energizing himself, he turns to the tree and says, Ilan, Ilan, tree, O tree, bama avarechecha. With what should I bless you? Should I bless you? Sheyehei tzilchanah, that you should have pleasant shade. Harei tzilchanah, you already have pleasant shade. Should I bless you to have this refreshing water? You already have a stream of water. Ella yihiratzain, you already have the fruit and all. Yihiratzain, I bless you. Sheyehei, what does he say? Harei tzeles. Okay, it's a song. It's words from the Gemara, which is a song, and I'll have to remember the words. Ilan, Ilan, shvi o shvi, bama havarechecha. How should I bless you? Sheyehei peirosecha mesukin. Should I bless you to have sweet fruit? Haharei peirosecha mesukin. You already have sweet fruit. Sheyehei tzilchanawe, haharei tzilchanawe. Should I bless you to have pleasant shade? Your shade already is pleasant. Ella, Ella yiratzain, Ella, Ella yiratzain. But may it be Hashem's will. Shekol netiyois. That all the fruits, all the seedlings coming from you should be exactly like you. And this, my friends, I think represents the type of person who doesn't cease to remember that I am here, he or she is put in this world by God and is indispensable for the mission, for this purpose, to be an ambassador of God at this and every single moment, to bring light, to bring love to the people around us, no matter where we are in life. If the sun is just rising, whether it's fully aglow, or even if it's on its way down, whether I'm young, whether I'm middle-aged, whether I'm old, regardless of my age or stage in life, never to forget my purpose, my mission, why I'm here. Every single one of us is in that leadership position. We are here to be agents of love, of hope, of trust. Don't get drunk on our own accomplishments, but remember our duty to those around us, to our loved ones, to our community, to our nation, to our world. What are we here for? That's the type of tree. That's the type of shade that we want to be. Remember who we are, what our purpose, what our mission is, and why God put us here. Let me conclude with one more story from the Gemara. The Gemara tells the story, Masechet Tainas. Let me read it to you from the Gemara. The story goes of a person who was traveling on the road. Actually, this person has a name. The Gemara tells us his name was Choni Hamagel. Choni the circle maker. He was a great sage. He was very concerned, caring for his people. And Choni once was traveling on the road and he saw a person, he saw a person on the street, on the road, who was planting a carob tree. Amar lei, so Choni said to this person, "Hi, hello. Ad kama sheninat." This man looked like an elderly gentleman. He asks him, "How old are you?" Amar lei, the man told him his age. He was an old man. And he's planting a carob tree. So Choni asks him, "How many years does it take for this carob tree to bear fruit?" Remember, I told you that we eat carobs on Tu B'Shvat. It has to do with this story. So he asked this person, "How many years does it take for the carob tree to bear fruit?" The old man answers, "Shivin shni, 70 years." Amar lei, Choni said back to this man, "Pshitalach, the chayish shivin shnim. Do you think you're going to last another 70 years? You're already so old." Amar lei, Hi Gavra. This old man responds back to Choni. He says, Alma becharuba ashkachte. You know, when I came to this world, the old man says, there were already fully grown carob trees. Somebody planted them for me. And therefore, ki heichi de shasli avasi shaslinami. Just as my ancestors and the people who came before me planted those trees for me, so too I plant for my children, for the next generation. Gemara goes on to say, actually, that Choni Hamagel fell asleep. He was the original Rip Van Winkle. He fell asleep for many, many years, till he woke up 70 years later to see a fully grown carob tree. And he sees a young man picking from the tree and asks him, "Who planted that tree for you?" He says, "It was my great-grandpa." And Choni realized that we each have our purpose. My friends, are you and I planting something in our lives which our grandchildren will be able to look at and say, "Thank you, Grandpa," just like this old man who planted the carob tree. They could say, "Thank you, Grandma, Bubby's 80. That's why the Torah compares us to the tree in the field. Every single human being, we leave an impact. Life is a play, and each of us contributes a verse. Each of us casts our own inimitable shadow in the world. The question is, how profound, how real is our impact? Will my shadow be that of a bird? Will it be that of the wall? Will it be that of a tree? Says the Zohar, Chol Yoima v'Yoima Avidabidite. Every single day has its work to be done. And just as the work and the world has work for us, the Rebbe would say every single day is an opportunity to work in order to fulfill our divine mission, the mission, the indispensable purpose why God put us into this world, to illuminate our portion of the world, to influence myself and my surroundings, those around us. You know, as they say, there are people who never begin to live. There are people who are waiting until they can begin to live. And there are people, my friends, who never stop living. Let's live each and every single day to its fullest. And as we say here, carpe diem, seize every single moment. Thank you all for joining me for today's shiur. Please be back tomorrow. We will continue. We will look at this week's Torah portion, and we will be back in person here starting in February. Stay tuned for the details of our in-person shiurim starting soon. Thank you all for joining us. Look forward to seeing you. Have a wonderful day, and sei gesund.
Sei gesund. Thank you, Rabbi.